All right, hi. So just going to do a quick walkthrough of how you can use a BMAD methodology in conjunction with your agentic AI workflows. So BMAD is breakthrough method for agile AI-driven development. So yes, it's agile. So we're going to be creating epic stories, going through a dev cycle, and then test validate, and then CI/CD. I found this idea in this public Git, so you can check it out yourself if you want, bmad-code-org. And it's a package that you can install, but I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to take the core concept of it and make it even more lightweight, bare bones, so that you could quickly just copy this directory into any project you're working in. And as long as you're using an LLM AI coding assistant, you're good to go. So essentially, the way it works is it just uses markdown files as agents and a workflow that the agent follows, and that's it. So it uses an orchestrator agent as the taskmaster, and the taskmaster's job is to keep stories, epics in line with the project mission statement or what it understands the project objectives to be. And then as you feed it instructions or requests, it will analyze your request. If it's a simple one, it'll just create the epic itself. But if it's a complex request, it may invoke its subagents for more granular feedback on what is needed to build that feature and how it should implement it. It'll then coalesce all the information from its subagents into essentially a summary report and craft an epic that way. It'll present it to me for approval, and then once I approve the epic, it'll get to story generation, where it will again determine if it needs to invoke its subspecialists to create the actual technical requests. And then once we have story files and we tell it to begin the dev cycle, it'll pass those story files to the dev agent for actual code generation. So the idea is, instead of just using a single agent here who has to keep the entire project context in mind, your request in mind, all these extra things where it's easy for it to get off track, go off on tangents, design things you didn't ask for. I'm sure we've all experienced this. By partitioning out your request through a master who keeps everything in line with the mission, and then partitions out the exact technical specifications that are needed to implement your request to subagents who have the ability to operate with different personas and provide in-depth, I suppose, analysis of what's needed, pass it back to the master who coalesces all of that, and then creates a story file. You're essentially compacting a huge context into a very laser-focused, very I don't know how you'd call it. Laser focused is all I can think of. Very laser focused file for the dev agent to consume. And so that dev agent doesn't have to keep all that context in mind and get lost in thought. It can just execute the plan that was given to it by all of these previous steps that your master and subagents did. And what you're going to end up with is, not always what you're looking for, but in general, higher quality first draft code output that can then be iterated on through this process again. And you can pretty quickly get to very nice, very well designed and feature complete products in very short amounts of time, especially because you can be running these processes in different terminals addressing different parts of your code base at the same time. Though you do have to manage collision, and there are strategies for doing that, such as, anytime an agent works, it has to work in its own feature branch and push to its own, and it always has to pull from a shared staging branch, right? And you as the human can be the gate to make the PRs and merge into whatever environments you want. So the way it's set up here is you just have a master agent, YAML notation, give it the persona it needs to be a taskmaster, coordinate workflows, understand that it has subagents that it can invoke, etc. And then subagents look something like this for a data architect, right? He's an expert in database design and optimization, ETL pipelines, data warehouses, things like that. You can optionally add commands. I don't know if I already went over this or not. But for example, I say I need a new page in my site that requires a new model with new columns. So the BMAD master will ask my architect, okay, what's the best database design for this? It's going to ask my UI agent, how should we design the UI for this? It'll ask the integration or API specialist if we have external endpoints we need to hit. What are the requirements there? It's going to gather all of that from these expert personas and put it into one epic. And I'll stop rambling now and just demonstrate. So here, and I already asked it a question about if I need Tailwind, because when you look at this very generic site for the demo, the login page is absolutely hideous, and I think we need to address it. So I actually did pre-start an epic for this. So what I'm going to do is have it complete a ticket, one of the sub-stories, while I have it work on another epic in a separate terminal. Okay, so let's go here and just clear things out and say BMAD master, create an epic to redesign the dashboard using Tailwind. And it'll get to work creating an epic, and once I approve the epic, it'll start creating stories that are needed to actually implement this very vague, nondescript task that I've given it. Okay, while this is doing that, let's come over here and redesign this login page and say, I already have a story made for it, and while it's working, I'll walk through how the process flow works. Okay, so begin dev cycle for an established story that we already have. And what's going to happen is I've addressed the BMAD master, so my LLM has now taken this persona. This persona now knows that it has subagents that it can invoke to get the information it needs to craft the epic that is aligned with the mission statement. And then it will follow my workflow, most times to a T, which I've designed here. And this is just a markdown file, again, where you essentially codify a flowchart like this and tell it the steps that it needs to take before it can move on to the next part of the project. And if things don't validate, then go back a step and redesign things, etc., etc. So here I have a Django backend, so I've created my process flow to be Django specific. So you can see that I'm reminding it that, hey, analyze the story, break it down into tasks, select the appropriate agent, figure out how it can hand off requirements from agent to agent. I've told it when it creates epics and stories, use this directory structure. And because I'm using Django for this demonstration, before we start, I have it do a pre-work validation, make sure everything's looking good. We have solid footing to begin our development work. I instruct it how it needs to verify things. And then these are all just instructions of all the phases of development that it can invoke as it works through the task, quality gates, invoke this agent for that, blah, 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 blah. You can make this as short or as long as you want. You can put in escape routes if it runs into errors. It's up to you. It's up to your imagination. So I'm just going to rubber stamp everything while I'm doing this, but that would be an opportunity to see what it's actually doing, request differences, or request edits, reject things, etc. And let's just check how our other terminal's doing. So here's what it did. It's creating the directory to store my epic files. It's going to present the epic to me for approval because that's what I've defined here in my process flow. And so let's see what it's just done here. Okay, it wants to enhance customer experience with professional grade dashboard interface, and it's going to be Epic 001, and yeah, business value, success criteria, technical scope, dependencies, constraints, risk, story breakdowns, stakeholders, definition of done. All right, I'll just accept it. So in my epics directory, let's see, it actually put it in dashboard, tailwind, redesign, epic 001, epic overview. Okay, and now it should start creating stories as it breaks down this epic into subtasks and which sub-agents it needs input from to generate these stories. So now, when we begin a dev cycle and approve this story, our dev agent doesn't have to keep in mind our total code base context and figure out what to do. It has very explicit instructions on what needs to happen, and it's all orchestrated by the master. So we're talking with the master now, and we hardly ever, unless you have a very specific thing you want information from, we hardly ever invoke the sub-agents directly. You can usually just do everything through the master agent. Okay, so this dev cycle has completed for Epic 17 Story 2, which was the actual redesign of the login form. So let's just see if it, okay, it did redesign it. It's still not the best, but we no longer have floating components that were misaligned. It's a little better, but now what we can do, now we have our second iteration of login. We can just tell it, create another story to, refine it even further, or put in your own personal touches, or now you have your scaffolding where you can actually go into the HTML file and make personal edits if that's going to be faster, or put your own personal touch on it. But now you get an idea of how this works. You pretty much just interact with your LLM and say, you either instruct it, create an epic for a feature to do requirements gathering, and then once you approve the epic and stories, you just tell it begin dev cycle for this story, and then it passes that file to the dev agent to figure out exactly how to generate that code. So you end up with higher quality outputs on first pass, second pass, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So really the main concepts are just, hey, create a master agent, create some sub agents, and then create a process flow and instruct the master agent to strictly adhere to your process flow markdown file, and it'll do that. So yeah, you'll get less errors because you're performing your validation, error checks, testing all within your flow. You don't have to tell it to fix an error after it's developed something, because that's already been through cycles in your workflow. Okay, so and obviously you can see here, you can have as many terminals of these agentic workflows as going. Just set up a CI/CD pipeline and make your agents understand that they have to, always pull from here and always push from here, or always ask for human verification at this step. And you can very quickly and easily design a workflow that fits your work style and your development style. It really only takes like a day or less than a day to set up this how you want it. And then you're going to save yourself so much time down the road, because you won't have to be redirecting your code generation agents and saying, gosh, why did it do this? I didn't want this. This is way off base. It's going to be much closer to what you envisioned every time you give it a task to do. So hope this is helpful. I know it went a bit longer than I was hoping, but you get the idea now. So just copy the BMAD directory into your project. Just instruct your Claude MD to adhere to the process workflow, and that's it. And then start talking to your LLM, address it if you want. It'll follow that to a T, and then you're good to go. Okay, so thanks. See ya.